Hello, dear friends. I hope you're doing well, and I hope you continue to enjoy your summer vacation. Today's question concerns a point related to grammar for writing. Let's start. Let's consider the following direct and short sentences. They arrived in the conference room. The meeting started. The question is how we can combine these sentences by using scarcely and no sooner. First, we all know that arriving in the conference room precedes, in our case, the starting of the conference. This indicates that the verb of the first chronological action is in the past perfect. The verb of the second action, which is starting the conference, is to be conjugated in the simple past. This is something that most of you already know, I suppose. Now, what happens when we use scarcely to combine these two sentences? First, we need to insert scarcely between, we're talking about the first action, which is conjugated in the past perfect. We insert the word scarcely between the auxiliary had and the verb of the first action. Then we separate the two sentences with when. So when we say scarcely, as a way of combining these two sentences, we have to use when after. Between the two clauses, I mean. Then we conjugate the verb of the second action in the simple past, because it's the second chronologically. With these steps in mind, we have the following final sentence. They had scarcely arrived in the conference room when the meeting started. Note, please, that instead of scarcely, we can use hardly or barely. These are interchangeable. And we can choose to use any of the three, scarcely, hardly, barely, without any change that accompanies this substitution. So we can say they had barely arrived in the conference room when the meeting started, or they had hardly arrived in the conference room when the meeting started. Now, what if we were asked to combine these two sentences using no sooner? With no sooner, the rule is slightly different. It's different in the sense that instead of putting when to separate the two sentences, we have to put then, T-H-A-N, then for the comparative, because we have ER for sooner. It's like sooner, sooner than. This is how we can remember these things. So with scarcely, hardly, barely, we use when, and with no sooner, we use then. Given this rule, our sentence will look like they had no sooner arrived in the conference room than the meeting started. Not when the meeting started, as we did with the previous connectors. Okay, so this is one part of this mini lesson. The second part concerns what happens when we would like to start with any of these connectors. That is to say, when these connectors scarcely, hardly, barely, and no sooner occur at the beginning of the sentence. The answer is that when the sentence starts with scarcely, barely, hardly, or no sooner, inversion is a must. No sooner had they arrived. Had they arrived, here we have an inversion because we have started with no sooner. The same thing happens when we have scarcely, barely, and hardly. They had hardly started the meeting, they had hardly arrived in the conference room. Hardly had they arrived in the conference room. They had scarcely arrived in the conference room. Scarcely had they arrived in the conference room. And then we continue with when. If it's no sooner, it's then, etc. All right. So they had scarcely arrived in the conference room when the meeting started. Scarcely had they arrived in the conference room when the meeting started. Okay. This inversion is required because there is a rule in English saying that when there is a negative expression or a near negative expression like scarcely and hardly and barely, so when these start a sentence, then inversion is inevitable. So we have to do the inversion. With this, I would like to thank you so much, and I hope that you are enjoying and that you continue to enjoy your summer vacation. Thank you so much.